Olá, Tiago Faria, tiagofaria.pt e este é o 22º episódio do podcast do Tiago. Eu hoje tenho uma enormíssima honra de ter como convidado o Blair Enns. Ele é o fundador e CEO da Win Without Pitching e é um autor de dois incríveis livros. Eu só li um deles, mas quero muito ler o segundo livro. O primeiro é o The Win Without Pitching Manifesto e o segundo é Pricing Creativity, A Guide to Profit Beyond the Billable Hour. Eu descobri o Blair através do Chris Doe, que foi um dos convidados que eu tive aqui no canal, que pode ver aqui no link acima. Ele é basicamente o criador da estratégia de preço que eu sigo religiosamente, que chama-se Value-Based Pricing, ou seja, preço com base no valor acrescentado, que acho que é realmente o único caminho a seguir, e que pode ser implementado não só para agências de marketing e de criativas, como também para, na minha opinião, para outros tipos de negócios business to business. Portanto, vamos aqui ter uma conversa interessante, saber um pouco sobre a história do Blair e ver como é que você pode implementar no seu negócio. Hi Blair, welcome to my channel. Thank you so much.
Hi, Tiago. My pleasure. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you for doing this in English. I wish I could speak Portuguese, but I struggle with one language, and I'm impressed by anybody who speaks more than one. So
you don't speak French, right? You're from Canada, but you're not from the.
No, I can order food.
S'il vous plaît.
I could probably do that in Portuguese as well.
No, you don't have to. I'll put probably subtitles later, and everything's fine. Thank you so much for this. So I made a quick, brief introduction, but for those who don't know you, could you give them a quick intro of who you are, what you do?
Yeah, I'm the founder of Win Without Pitching, which is a sales and pricing training organization for creative professionals. I've written 2 books, which you've talked about. I launched Win Without Pitching as a solo consulting practice in 2002, and in 2013, I pivoted the business model from consulting to a training company where I've pursued scale, hired employees, and run kind of standardized training programs now. So that's a little bit of the origin story. I came out of the advertising world initially and spent some time working in graphic design as well. I see myself as a creative, as a writer, but I always worked on the business side. So I worked in account management and then new business development. So I come from advertising and design, and I've been advising those folks and other creative professionals since 2002.
That's brilliant. But now going a lot backwards. Let's go to the very beginning. What type of a child were you? What were your dreams?
Oh man, really?
Aspirations? Were you always focused on this? Did something change in the middle?
I wanted to be a lawyer. My father was a police officer. So he was a member of I live in Canada. He was a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or the Mounties.
Oh, wow.
And I was pretty good with language, and I was pretty good in an argument. So for some reason, I thought logic and language, and I would see these lawyers on TV shows, and I think, yeah, I can see myself doing that. I can see myself arguing to a judge and jury. And I had this dream. So I don't remember how old I was, but I had this dream for a few years. And then one day my father said to me, Blair, lawyers work Saturdays. And I went, what? No, I'm out. That's it. I'm out. There's no way I'm going to sign up for a job that causes me to work on the weekend. Now, the irony is there are times when I have pretty good balance in my life, and I'm at that time right now. Yes. But there's lots of times in the year where if I'm awake, I'm working, and the day of the week doesn't really matter. And I do it because I love,
because
sometimes
you love it.
Yeah, I love it. Like sometimes
I feel like work, basically, right?
Business. Sometimes it does, but most of the time I'm doing it because I love it. So it's kind of ironic. I'm so glad I didn't become a lawyer. And then I stumbled into advertising. I had pretty good oratory skills. I was a pretty good public speaker. And when I was in 8th grade, which is the middle grade of junior high in Canada, I won the school oratorical contest where we all had to write speeches in our classes. And if you won and do a little competition, and you'd get up and deliver your speech. And if you won the class, you would go to the grade. And then if you won the grade, you would compete against the people who won the other grades. And so I did that, and I won. And the subject of my speech was advertising. So I was 13 years old doing public speaking on the subject of advertising. So I guess it was no surprise that eventually I went to work in advertising, and then I fell out of love with advertising.
Oh, so but in advertising, you were more on the kind of copywriting side of it, or about the design?
I was I was an account manager.
Account
So
manager.
I was doing strategy with clients, and I was the client interface. Yeah. And then at a very young age, I was 22 years old. I was in my first ad agency job, and my boss said to me, he said, "You seem pretty fearless. I'm going to put you in charge of new business. So go get new clients." And I had no idea how to do it. So I did it the way everybody had done it before me. And after a few years of this, I started to see this is a little bit ridiculous. How you have to give your highest value thinking away for free. We have no power in the relationship. The client pushes us around. They ask us to do all this stuff. So eventually the seeds of Win Without Pitching, the consulting practice, and then the book were born.
Okay. But so you said you started your career, it was in Young and Rubicam, right? As a account supervisor? No.
I started before that at another local agency
Okay.
in that small Canadian city where I lived. And then I went to Young and Rubicam, and then I went to another agency that was bought by BBDO. Then I went to another agency that was bought by a publicly held Canadian company. So I had, I also worked for McCann Erickson as well.
Yes, I saw on your LinkedIn.
I worked for large and small agencies.
That's brilliant. And what were the main lessons that you learned during that period? What remained in your mind forever that now you implement in your business in the present?
When I look back now, I think about all of the things I learned not to do.
The mistakes.
Yeah, and I think I'm a little bit of a contrarian. So if everybody's doing something, I look at it and ask the question, is this the best way? In fact, one of my personal mottos is, there's a better way to do this, whatever it is I find myself doing. And I'm going to find it, even if it takes me 4 times longer.
Okay.
So I'm interested in finding a better way to solve a problem. And I'm interested in looking at the things that other people are overlooking. And I think a lot of creative people are. And I've just applied those lessons to how agencies sell.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. So up to that point, it brought you to 2002, right? Where you started Win Without Pitching, according to your LinkedIn, as a new business consultancy to creative firms. So that was the initial purpose of that company. Can you just tell me quickly about the 6 months before you opened that company? What was in your mind? What were the main obstacles that you had to overcome? Can you just describe us a little bit if you can?
I'll probably go back maybe a year before.
A year.
Because the genesis of this business was really, I wanted to get out of advertising. I wanted to get out of the creative agency world because I had gone to work for a boss who was not a very good boss and wasn't very kind. And it was a very difficult working environment. And I had had enough. I was fed up. I needed to get out. And I had tripped over this little remote mountain village where I currently live. My wife and I had found it. And
Oh, wow.
Plotting for how could we get here? I was plotting. She had told me, I'm not moving anywhere. We're going to raise a family. But I had a really horrible work experience. And my wife volunteered to me, why don't we get out of here? Why don't we leave the city? Why don't we move to this remote mountain village? We'll homeschool our kids. We'll figure out what to do for a living. Wow. So that became the plan. And then that was a couple things happened between when we hatched the plan and when we finally made it a reality. But it was really, I discovered this little village in the middle of nowhere. I wanted to live in it. I wanted to find a way to earn a living here. And then I got so fed up with advertising that there was this moment where I and my wife, who's now my business partner, we were able to just let go and say, we're going to leave a bad situation. And even if we don't know how we're going to earn a living, we'll figure it out when we get there. So we got here And I just had this vague idea of a consulting practice, and I had a contract job. My last employer, so I was fired by the evil employer. I went to work for another smaller firm, and I really liked the guy I worked for. He was fantastic. He restored my faith in creative people and the creative professions.
Okay.
So I promised to work for him for a year. Well,
while you were already living in this remote.
no, I was
before.
Stayed where we were. I said, I'll work for you for a year.
Okay.
And then we're going to go do this thing. And a year turned into 20 months, and it was a great experience. And I had to leave. It was time to go. So we're packing up, ready to go. And I was having this goodbye lunch with my employer. And he said, what are you going to do for a living?
Yeah.
And I said, I have a vague idea of a consulting practice. And he said, do you want to keep working for me on contract? Do you want to do sales for me remotely on contract? And I said, sure. So I did that for a year while I was building the consulting business. And then after
transition.
Yeah, it was a great transition. And I still think very highly of that person, that firm, and that experience. He saved me, because if I had quit the business after being fired from the previous agency, it would have left me with a really sour taste in my mouth about the entire profession.
Got it. Makes total sense.
Yeah.
So before that, you learned about all the mistakes, right? That was the main lessons you've learned. But so after you started the company, what were the main mistakes you made in the first couple of years that turned out to be amazing lessons?
Oh, how much
Think
time
of one.
I don't, when I think of the early days, even though I made a lot of mistakes, I was so lucky. And for a bunch of, the timing was just right. It was 2002. It's early days of the internet being used for business. So I launched this consulting practice, and I'm thinking, well, how am I going to get clients? So I found some lists online of agency owners, my target market. And I just started sending them emails, and my response rates were massive. My response rates were like 50%. In fact, I was using email in 2000 when I was doing business development for an agency. And my response rates when I started to use email was 70%. 70% of the people I emailed would reply.
Wow.
Now, that was back in the early days when not everybody had an email address. So when they got an email, they were happy to reply.
You've got email, right?
Yeah, you've got mail, ding. Yeah, so 70%. It's crazy how times have changed. But I got really, it was actually fairly easy for me to build my business, and there weren't a lot of direct competitors. There was this new way of reaching out to people. I jumped on it right away. I had a very contrarian point of view on how agency new business development should be done. This idea that you don't have to pitch, that you don't have to give your highest value product away for free. So all of that just resonated, and it worked very well. And in we were raising young families. So in the first 7, 8, 9 years of the business, it was really a lifestyle business where I didn't work much in the summer. We live in a beautiful little resort town on the shore of a 90-mile lake in the middle of the mountains, in the middle of nowhere. Wow. Less than 1,000 people. And so in the summer, I would just spend most of the day at the beach. I would go in and work for a few hours a day. And then when my kids got older, then I started to get serious about this as a business, first a consulting business, then a training company. Then now those mistakes that I made in transition, when I went from lifestyle business to real business, these are really the mistakes that stick with me. And I'm still sorting through right now. So in the early days, A, I was lucky. B, it was a lifestyle business. I wasn't interested in working too hard. I was really interested in raising my kids. So I don't think back on those early days. I don't see mistakes. I see just a great time and really happy with the decisions I've made. And then since then, as I've become a real CEO, it's just mistake after mistake. I don't know where to start.
That's a beautiful way to look at it. Really inspiring. And you mentioned briefly in 2013, you kind of transitioned then, right, from to a training and coaching organization, right?
Yes.
How did that happen? So was this decision you made of start having a lifestyle business and become a real business?
That decision I'd made that a few years earlier, I think. And then, so what happened, and I forget the dates, except for I remember I got pneumonia in November of 2000.
Okay.
And in January of 2013, I transitioned the business into a training company.
Okay.
Because I had 2 weeks flat on my back in bed thinking, and I got pneumonia. I was sick for the 4th time that year. I got sick on 3 different continents, and not like, say, I didn't have any like horrible illness, but I would just run down. I run myself ragged. I felt at the time like I had pushed the solo consultancy model as far as I could. I earned as much money. I was working as hard. I look back on it now and I see how ridiculous my thinking was then. But I also understand that I was essentially trapped between business models. So as a solo consultant, at about the time I was getting into the subject of value-based pricing. I was starting to learn what I didn't know about pricing and value and pricing based on value. And I came to the realization that I was running a consulting practice all wrong. I had productized my services.
Exactly.
Yeah. And now I make the distinction between, you need to understand, is yours a customized service business or is it a productized service business? And a lot of people who are running customized service businesses, like I was and like most marketing agencies are, and in that model, you have a small number of clients. Each engagement is a unique creative act. Each pricing model is a unique creative act. And that's how it should work. And you have a finite capacity to work with only a small number of clients at any one time. And that's the way a customized services model should work. And a productized services model is when you identify all of these products, you put standard prices on these products, then you go try to sell these products to a very large number of people. And it usually requires a larger team. It requires standards, policies, procedures, pricing. The culture is different, and it's almost always in pursuit of scale. When a customized services firm transitions to a productized services firm, they're looking for scale. So I realized that I was a customized services firm, and I had kind of quasi-productized my services, but there was no scale. And there's no point in productizing your services and your pricing unless you're pursuing scale. So I had to make a decision. I was either going to do consulting properly, and I was going to price based on value. And by that, I mean, not based on how much time it took me or what the market value of my services was. I would look at each client, each situation, the opportunity to help, the opportunity to create value, and then I would customize the engagement and the price to their specific situation. So I was either going to do that, be fully customized and customize the pricing based on value, or I was going to go in the other direction and productize and pursue scale. And I could have really gone either way, but I decided to choose to productize and pursue scale. And when I share that story, some people who were in the situation that I was in, caught in the mushy middle, they think that that's the right answer, is to pursue a productized company and scale. And it's not. It's just the one that I chose.
Okay.
And there are days when I think, oh, I should have chosen the other one. But for the most part, I'm happy with it. So you really have to decide, is yours customized or productized? And then you pursue that. And those digital marketing firms in particular, they get caught in the mushy middle. They productize their services. They put their prices on their website. They're violating what I have in my second book, Pricing Creativity. They're violating the first rule of pricing creativity, which is to price the client, not the service or the job.
Otherwise, they become like commoditized and just like many others, right? And then people just will compare based on price, and then that's it, right?
Yeah, and then you find yourself undercharging to some people, and then you have some people who won't buy from you because it's too expensive. You're not creating enough value. So value-based pricing really means you start with the value that you hope to create, and then you price based on that. And sometimes everybody thinks that value-based pricing means charging more. And hopefully ultimately, when you put it all together as a package, you should end up charging more and doing more for your clients. But sometimes pricing based on value means recognizing that what you're proposing to do for somebody isn't all that valuable to them. So if you're going to do it, the price needs to be lower. And maybe that means you need to find a way to deliver in a way that's less expensive than you're previously used to delivering.
Completely true. And that is all in the first book, Win Without Pitching Manifesto. I love that name. It's absolutely genius. It has 12 proclamations, correct?
Yes.
How did you come up with this idea of proclamations? What was the origin of this? I know you already had kind of some ideas of what you would like to transmit. How did this concept came to life?
I wanted to write a manifesto. I love manifestos.
Nice. They're so like terminal, like that. That's it. No, nothing else, right?
I love the belief. I love the inspirational language of manifestos.
We will not. We will, right?
We shall. And so I read a lot of. So there's the standard manifestos. I think the best book, the most important book ever read, might be the Curtis Creek Manifesto, which is a book nobody has ever heard of unless they are a fly fisher.
Okay.
And it's a graphic novel. And I always say, if you want to change the world, buy that book in bulk and give it to every 10-year-old you know.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the Curtis Creek Manifesto, and I read a lot of Confucius and Nietzsche and people who wrote in kind of aphorisms. And I always wanted to write a book like that. It started out as I was writing a newsletter, which I now call a blog post. And I wrote this article in, I'm not sure when, I think it was probably somewhere around 2007 or 2008. And it was called 12 Proclamations for a New Year. And I sent it out at the end of December. And I tried on this new language and these 12 principles that I put forward in the form of proclamations. We shall, we will specialize, we will replace presentations with conversations. That's kind of the nature of the proclamations. And I put it out there as a brief article, about 1,300 words. And I was nervous because the language, the style was new for me, but I got this overwhelmingly positive feedback. And so some months later, I'd wanted to write a book, and I thought, no, that would be good framework for the book. And so it came out in 2010, 9 years ago. It sold over 30,000 copies, and annual sales have increased every year. Maybe since, I'm not sure about the first 3 years, but in the last 6 years or so, annual sales have increased every year. So it just keeps gaining more and more momentum, and I'm really grateful for that.
It's like wine, getting value over time.
Maybe. I think there's just a critical mass of people talking about it out there. When I wrote it, it's when you look at it and when you read it, it is clearly a timeless book, and that was my intent. I wanted this book to be relevant. I wanted a book that would be in long after I'm gone, and I wanted it to be relevant. I wanted you, when you picked it up, no matter what year it was, I wanted you to feel like this was relevant now, and it's been around a long time. And
Absolutely.
I think that, yeah.
And the manifesto style is perfect because really people are looking for guidance, and it really gives them a clear guidance what to not do, what to do. And if you follow the path, success will come. So it's really a beautiful book. And I liked especially one of the proclamations, which is, we will diagnose before we prescribe. That's like the core idea. I think that the vast majority of companies start by pitching their product services even before knowing what is actually the problem, right? That's like a super common mistake across all industries. Why do you think that is so? People know that when they go to the doctor, the doctor asks questions, right? Try to know what's wrong with you and prescribe something based on that, and not based on like, okay, this is generic pills to solve any problem, right? Why do you think that happens?
I think because a lot of us in the creative professions believe that our job or our industry belongs among the professions. We're not laborers. We're working with our minds. sharing ideas and advice. And in some ways, you can view it as medical advice for businesses. I think that's one way to think about it. So I think there are times when we feel like we should have the respect of those more traditional professionals. But if you look at how you sell and how you operate with your clients, you would be, so when I say you, I mean most designers or creative, most people who own an ad agency or a design firm or even a marketing firm, you would be guilty, most of you would be guilty of malpractice. You would be guilty of having a client come to you and say, my problem is X, I need Y, how much for Y? So it's like you going to your heart surgeon and saying, I have this pain in my chest, I think I need quadruple bypass surgery. And the surgeon saying, okay, lie down. Right? So until we start acting as professionals, and by that I mean taking the obligation to diagnose before we prescribe seriously. Until we take ourselves seriously, clients won't take us seriously. You should see it as malpractice when a client comes to you and says, I need X. You should see it yourself as having an obligation to validate the client's diagnosis before you proceed with this subscription. And often that means you have to be paid to do a little bit of just basic research or just understanding of the client's situation. And that should be built into your methodology of how you work. And if it's simple enough, you can do that in the sale for free. If it's a more elaborate situation and you really need to do a lot of work to understand the client's situation, to see if the problem is as they say, and the solution is the one they're looking for, then you should be paid to do that. But I think that's the root of it is we want to be seen as professionals, but we don't act professional in that way. Holding these really high standards and understanding, that if understanding that we need to validate the client's diagnosis before we proceed on anything. Because every creative professional, every design firm owner, advertising professional has been in a situation where the client has come to them and said, I need X. And that professional has gone to work to develop and deliver X. And very early on, maybe right at the beginning, they started thinking, you don't need X, you need Y. Well, if you believe that as the professional, your doctor wouldn't do that. Your doctor wouldn't say, okay, I'll do the quadruple bypass on you. But what you really need is to take a couple of aspirin. They would never do that. There's more money in the surgery, so I'm going to do the surgery even though you don't need it. That's not professional. You'll be not disbarred. You'll lose your medical license for that. Lawyers would be disbarred for doing the equivalent in the legal world. So we need to think that way.
And that opens up a lot of opportunities, right? You immediately differentiate yourself from all the others, right? You start to be seen as an authority, someone that really worries about the customer, about what will be the ideal solution. And it's super easy, right? Just ask more questions, right? Instead of just giving immediately your unique solution.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. But best of all, it opens up the opportunity to charge more, right? Because of value-based pricing concept. Can you please explain a tiny bit briefly what this concept of value-based pricing is for my audience?
Sure. So I'm going to say you, and you probably includes all entrepreneurs. There are three things you can price and sell. If you're in a service business, there are three things you can price and sell. You can price and sell the inputs of time and materials.
Yes.
You can price and sell the outputs of the deliverable. So if somebody needs a logo or a video or a website, it's this much for a logo, this much for a video, this much for a website. When you're selling the time, the inputs of time and materials, somebody comes to you and says, I need a logo, how much? And you say, I don't know, but it's 150 euros an hour. So that's option one. Option two is the deliverables. Yeah, logos cost €1,500 or 15,000 or 1.5 million, whatever it is. But the third option is you can price and sell the outcomes or the value that you propose to create. So I, as a salesperson, if the client came to me and said, I want a logo, how much is a logo? I might say, tell me a little bit about your company. Tell me what it is. So you're launching a new business, you're rebranding. What is it that you're hoping to accomplish? Describe the benefits that you expect to accrue to you from a new logo. In your wildest dreams, what's the most that you think can happen? What are the metrics of success? So I'm going to go through the 4-step process here. What's the desired future state? What do you want is step one. What will we measure? What are the metrics of success? How will we know you've achieved or accomplished these things? What are the things we'll measure? That's step two. Step three is, how much value would this create for you if we did what you want and we hit these metrics? And step four is, what would you be if I could deliver this value to you, if I could help you create this pivot, relaunch this company so that you go from A to B, what would you be willing to pay for that? So you get a little bit of pricing guidance, and that's the 4 steps of the value conversation. So based on that value conversation, which is simple but not really easy for reasons we can talk about, you then set price. And again, the first rule of pricing creativity is you price based on the value that you propose to create rather than the outputs or the inputs of the time and materials. And I'll just say here that at a typical creative firm, the firms that I work with, I don't think you should think of going from time input-based or cost-based pricing to value pricing entirely. I think you just look for the opportunities where it really makes sense to price based on your value, and the client will tell you. So the second rule of pricing creativity is to always offer options. So I said there's 3 different things you can price and sell. You could put forward 3 different options, and you could say to your client, you can buy time and it's this much per hour, and I don't know how many hours it'll take, so the risk is on you. You can buy the deliverable. So I'll make an estimate of the time, and I'm going to price it based on the high end of my range, and you're going to pay that range. So you get some price certainty. It might cost you more, but you get price certainty. So that's the deliverable or the output. Or you can work with me as a business partner, and we'll set the outcome objectives of what you hope to achieve, what the financial targets are, et cetera. And then you can pay me to help you hit those really big numbers. And usually value-based pricing means putting some of that compensation at risk. Not always, but I would speak to the clients now. If you're listening to this and you're thinking of hiring an agency, there are times when you think, oh, I just want to pay, I'll just pay the hourly rate, or I just want to pay for the deliverable. But there are times when there's so much uncertainty, what you really want is you want a partner to work with you.
Yeah.
You have a problem or an opportunity, and you're talking to somebody who just wants to sell you something. They want to sell you some time, or they want to sell you some outputs. And there are times when that makes sense to you. But there are other times when you want somebody who says, listen, forget about how much time it's going to take me. Forget about what all the deliverables are. We will do what we have to do. We'll stick with you until we hit these results, these outcomes. And for us to work that way with you, you're going to end up paying us a lot of money when we are successful together, but it's going to be worth it because we're going to help to create so much more value. So there are times as the client when there's just no comparison. You're going to work with the partner. And there are times when it makes sense to you're just going to buy some hours.
Fascinating.
It really comes down to the client. So value-based pricing is the best in a lot of situations. It's best for both parties because the client has a true partner who's working to the same results as them. And it's good for the agency too, because they can make more money. They earn more money by helping create a higher level of certainty around the value they propose to create. And then there are times when it's just like, sell me some hours. And that's fine too.
Makes sense. And a bit of a trend, how to say, off topic that you're kind of usually discussing in your program. Do you believe that this could be implemented, the value-based pricing could be implemented for any other kind of B2B business, not just agencies or creative agencies? Say, for example, like a contractor, could you use this approach to win more refurbs for real estate investors, stuff like that?
Yeah, anybody who's delivering any service for sure. Even productized service companies. When you think of hotels, airlines, they
Okay.
price. Their pricing is really it can be viewed as value-based pricing, but there's a lot more science. There's all kinds of data that goes into those prices. They have to segment their audience and say, we have a bunch of people who value this. They don't want to spend a lot of money, so we'll strip out all the extras and we'll give them the cheap price. And then we have people who value the concierge level offering. So we'll put together packages for these different segments. In a customized services business, you're segmenting to units of one. So every client is a segment. So you have to learn about what the client really values, and then you would put forward your proposal with options that you think are most interesting to that audience. So I think you're a contractor, you're a dog walker, you're a hairstylist, any type of service, any type of customized service can work this way, and even some productized services.
Brilliant. I also believe so, and that was how I wanted to know from your mouth if it's really accurate. And tell me, what is your favorite proclamation out of the manifesto? Do you have any?
I think they're like my children. I have 4
You
children.
cannot choose.
They're all your favorite. I hear people say that you're not supposed to have favorite child, but everybody
Everyone
has a
does.
favorite. I don't. I've never had a favorite child, so I don't get that. I don't. So when it comes to the proclamations, I have temporary favorites from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
But the most important one is the first one, and that is we will specialize.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get that one wrong, a lot becomes difficult. And there are times when it doesn't make sense to specialize, and there's not a lot of guidance in the book. There's some high level guidance, but not a lot of detailed guidance on how to specialize a creative firm. But you have to understand that your power in the sale, the largest driver of how much power you do or do not have, is the availability of substitutes, the alternatives that the client sees that he or she has to hiring your firm. So you eliminate alternatives by specializing your firm, focusing on a niche and building deep expertise in a niche. And it can be a vertical industry like hotel and leisure, or it can be a discipline like UX design, or it can be a combination of those two things. And there are other ways, and there are, with all the combinations, there's so many different ways you can specialize a firm. So smaller firms in particular really do need to pay attention to that first proclamation of specialization. And so I think that's the one
specialize?
most
Yeah. Did you specialize immediately when you started winning without pitching your consultancy solopreneur service?
So it was sales. It was sales consulting for creative professionals, for creative firms, and now it's sales training for creative professionals. So the target has always been the same. And I've had many people over the years come to me and say, this Win Without Pitching stuff, this book, it's relevant to people outside of the creative professions.
Absolutely.
I've spoken to audiences of accountants, lawyers, all kinds of weird, strange organizations that aren't in our niche. We have people in our training program who are consulting companies, staffing companies, event management companies. So the advice that I'm taking and giving to others is you narrow your focus, and the target should be smaller than the market. So you aim for the target, the small target, and you're happy to hit the market. And when you're successfully niched, those outside of that niche, outside of your target market, many will see relevance to them and what you do. So people outside of your target come to you and say, hey, we're interested in your service or product. Would it work for us? And then you just have to give the honest answer of whether or not you think it would work. And I think the biggest success that I've had, not the biggest success, but the strategic decision that I've made in my business that I'm most proud of is I've resisted all of the people who told me you should broaden win without pitching out to beyond the creative professionals. So we'll still allow them to join the training program or provide coaching or come to workshops if we think they'll get value out of it, but we don't pursue. We could have broadened win without pitching out to professional services. And if we'd done that, our audience, our target market would have become vastly bigger, but we also would have invited dozens or hundreds of direct competitors. And
yes,
against those competitors, we would have very little in the way of competitive advantage. So it becomes a bigger world, but we're less different in that bigger world. I really believe that what I know, and by extension, what my team knows, we're not so much experts in how to sell. We're experts in the peculiarities of the creative mind that makes selling difficult.
Yes.
For them.
Absolutely. And I think Chris Doe is following the same path. He will not stop specializing, but he's still attracting people like me, marketers, business owners. So you're completely, absolutely right about that. Specialize always. Yes. Okay, we're reaching the end, but I still have 2 questions from my audience. If you don't mind, one of them is from Diogo. And he asks, how can I apply value-based pricing for non-profit organizations when they don't have the profit mindsets of what is the value, how to put a number into it, you know? Do you have any opinion about that? Any thoughts?
It's a difficult question, Tiago, because without knowing more about the organization. So, but I'll take a stab at it. So, in the first section of my book, before I get to the rules, there are 6 rules of pricing creativity. The first section, I talk about principles, so the underlying principles. So I read all, the canon of literature on pricing, a lot of behavioral economics, and even some broader economics. And I wanted to get it down to the smallest number of principles that people needed to understand before they wrap their head around value-based pricing. And the first principle is the subjective theory of value, the idea that all value is subjective. At the end of the day, value really is just a feeling. Now, there's another model that says you can put value into 3 different buckets. 2 of them are economic. So you deliver value through cost reductions. You help your clients or organizations reduce cost. Revenue gains. You help your clients increase revenue. Or the third bucket is the really murky one known as emotional contributions to value, other forms of value that are non-economic. And so when you're thinking about pricing based on value and you're identifying what the desired future state is, what the client wants, or what the metrics of success are, and then you move to this third step, which is what's the value of this? The answers to that question may be largely non-economic. And it's people will still pay money for it, but it's really hard to do a direct correlation. So I would say keep having that value conversation. Keep asking your clients, what's the value of this to you? And then ask them, what would you be, if we could help you deliver this value, what would you be willing to pay for it? Mm-hmm. There's some more nuance that comes after that, but that's the key to value-based pricing. Really, the key to value-based pricing is taking the focus off of you and what your organization does and your products or services. I'm sure in the case of Tiago, it's services. Taking your focus off of them and focusing on the client. What do you want? What are the metrics of success? What's the value that we'll create? And then what would you be willing to pay for this? So have a few value conversations and just see what you get.
What happens? Yeah.
People tell you what they would pay for it.
Yeah, nothing better than just trying, right? Testing, giving a shot. Yeah. Brilliant answer. And the final one is from Marco. And I think he said in a PS note that I think I know the answer, that the answer is choose another client, but he would like to know if there's any other answer. So he asks how to handle a lead that does the math, milestone, date divided by cost to get an hourly rate. So it comes to you already with a price in mind based on what would be the costs, based on hourly rate.
So the client's coming and saying, I want to get something done by this time, and he's working backwards and dividing and saying this hourly rate.
This is what I think should be the price.
Yeah, I mean, you could say to the client, listen, there are different ways that we could price this. And if you're interested in buying our time, well, let's have a conversation about that. But you might be interested in buying the deliverable. Or you might be interested in a different working relationship. So why don't we begin by just having a conversation? So very often, the client comes to you self-diagnosed, self-prescribed, self-priced in this case. And so again, the value conversation, you take the shift off of you, and it's just, okay, forget about this project, forget about the hours, forget about the price. Let's just start at the beginning. And here's my favorite question, and it's in the book. You say to your client, your prospective client, it's 3 years from today. You and I are having coffee. You're really happy with what's happened over the last 3 years. So tell me, what has happened over the last 3 years to make you so happy? So it's a big, and there's an entire book written on this question. It's called the Dan Sullivan question. Mm-hmm. It's a great question for getting at the client's desired future state. And then from there, they paint this vision, and then you continue the value conversation. What are the okay, let's say you've identified your desired future state. Now, what are the metrics of success? What are the things that you would measure to prove that you've achieved this? And then what's the value of getting this? If I could help you do all this, what would you pay? And try to get a price range. And then, so now you've had the whole conversation. It's not about you. It's not about your product. It's just about price at the end. And his focus is not, he's not down looking at the details. His focus is on the horizon, looking at the big picture, the vision. Yes. And if at the end of that, he says, no, I still want to pay 100 euros an hour or whatever. Well, it may be that this is a price buyer, and it may be that your PS is correct. You just need to go get another client. But you should try. Just get him focused off of the minutia onto the vision of where he wants his business to go, or he wants to go. And if after that, if he won't buy into a conversation about the vision, then maybe it's a price buyer, and maybe you want to sell him some hours, and maybe you don't.
Boom. Marco, you just got the best answer of the interview. Thank you so much for that. Okay, we're kind of reaching the end. Just a couple of small questions about you. If you remember in the past 5 years, if you created a new habit that improves your life drastically, anything, could be anything, personal, professional. Do you remember any interesting?
Oh yeah, I'm always creating new habits, and some of them actually stick. So the one I'm on right now, which I just love, is I wake up in the morning, and before I've been awake for 30 minutes, I go downstairs, I put the coffee pot on for my wife. I get in my car, I drive down to the lake, which takes me about 3 minutes, and I go swimming in the very, very cold lake.
Oh my God.
And I've been doing that every morning for month and a half, and it's still warm here, but it's a glacial fed lake, and nobody else is swimming in the lake.
And is it still as painful as the first time you did it?
No. It's interesting. I was hiking yesterday in a remote mountain lake really high up, and I went swimming in that lake, and it's just straight from the glacier into that lake. And I'm thinking, I get into the water and I think, my breathing, I don't react. I have no reaction to cold. It doesn't matter how cold it is.
Wow.
But I can still feel my hands and feet getting numb. So I'm thinking, I wonder how long I could stay in here. But when you fall into cold water, what kills you is the shock, the breathing, so I've mastered that. So we'll see. So I love it. That's how I start my day. And if I can't, if I'm traveling and I'm not around a cold lake, I just take a cold shower. So that's a habit. That's the habit that I'm in love with it. I just can't wait to get up in the morning and just go plunge into cold water.
Me and my wife still complain about when it's 30 degrees outside and we touch the sea. Well, oh, it's too cold. And you're doing that, Blair. Brilliant. Just quickly, who do you follow online, if anyone, for advice and inspiration on design, business strategy, branding, Anyone?
Yeah, who do I follow? I follow my friend and podcast co-host David C. Baker. We have a podcast called Two Bobs. I follow Chris Do from the future. Love the work that he's doing. I know you've had him on your show. I follow. I don't follow a lot of people who do what I do, and so Chris and David are two of maybe 5 people in kind of the business advice for creatives that I follow. I try to really limit my. I follow economists. I'm a big Elon Musk fan. I've been a Tesla owner for 3 years. Nice. My 80-year-old father just bought one 2 weeks ago. So I follow him. I draw so much inspiration from what he does. So I try to pick a small number of people from all kinds of different fields. So I get all kinds of different thinking. I think it's dangerous to follow everybody in your niche. It's dangerous to follow too many people who also do what you do or who are too close to doing what you do. If you want to be an original thinker, you have to work to keep some information out, and that's really important to me.
Absolutely. And other than your books, if you had to choose a book to offer someone about any topic, which one would it be?
I think maybe the best basic business book that I've ever read is something that I only read a couple of years ago. It came out in 2014 though, and it's Peter Thiel's book, 0 to 1, Notes on Startups or Building the Future. And it's a simple book. It's filled with profound insights. And Peter Thiel he is one of the few original thinkers of our modern time. So 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. That's a big one.
Brilliant. Will be on the show notes. Thank you so much. We're in the end. How can people know more about you, Blair? Any links you would like to share?
Yeah, thank you. They can reach me at winwithoutpitching.com. They can learn about our training programs and our next workshops. I'm Blair Enns on Twitter and LinkedIn. I'm not on Facebook or Instagram. And my books, The Win Without Pitching Manifesto, you can find at Amazon, and Pricing Creativity can only be found at pricingcreativity.com, where you will see it is the only pricing book in the world priced based on the principles in the book. I'm quite proud of that.
I know that. Blair, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. It was a true honor, and you really added a ton of value for the Portuguese entrepreneurs. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tiago. I really appreciate the chance to show up and talk to you and your audience. So thank you for that.
Brilliant. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bom, foi então o final do 22º episódio. Eu não consigo dizer a palavra 20º. Muito obrigado pelo seu tempo. Espero que tenha gostado. Se gostou, deixe o seu gosto abaixo, subscreva o canal, faça todos os sociais e até ao próximo vídeo. Muito obrigado.